Sorry, Spiritual Soul Series podcast, and today we're back with Supriya Chechi, and we're going to continue the seventh chapter. I think it's the 16th verse, right?
That's right. Yes. Thank you, Kannan. Happy to be back.
Hi, yeah, and Hare Krishna and
Hare Krishna, Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Shila.
We are on verse 16 now, chapter 7. So, in the previous verse, we learnt of the four types who do not surrender. Basically, the four types we discussed. The Mudhas were so foolish that they can't find the time and they're just doing hard work all the time. The next, the Naradhamas, all four are basically called the Dushkritina, or the impious people, or those who don't have Sukriti or don't have any good pious credit. Okay, so this verse first is, of course, those who are very foolish because they are just stuck with doing a lot of hard work and they can't find the time to care about matters that actually should be of great benefit to them. The next one is the Naradhamas, the lowest of mankind, because they don't, it's not that they don't have time, they just completely wipe out the option or the possibility that there are higher matters and spiritual matters to inquire about. The third category are those who study a lot of the subject and then have their intelligence stolen away because of their deep-rooted enviousness and impiety. And that is the Mayayapa Hrita Jnana. And the last category are those who are openly atheistic, the Asuram Bhavam. They are completely openly and aggressively atheistic. So now we are leaving those four categories behind and moving to the four types who do surrender. And this is relatively easy. For one, we can see ourselves in these categories, maybe in more than one category. The first type, as verse 16 is telling us here, if you want, we can read that verse here.
So I'll just go to the verse. So, O best among the Bharatas, four kinds of pious men begin to render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desirer of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the absolute.
Okay, so easy enough. The first are those who are in distress, and it's usually when we find ourselves in some kind of trouble that we start to even pray to God. What to speak of praying specifically to Krishna. The second are those who are financially badly hit and some big something terrible happens and they pay desperately, usually to Lord Venkateshwara to give them wealth. The inquisitive are those who are mildly curious, often as a result of having suffered from some distress. That is, these are people who are going to ask questions like, why do bad things happen to good people? And they are curious, they want to know, there's doubt, there's a lot of doubt in their minds because they've suffered, they've been hit by something. They would like to believe in a God, but these issues are troubling them. That's also a fairly healthy beginning, actually. And the fourth category that's considered the highest of the lot, who are purely interested to know God, to know more and more knowledge of God or of the Supreme Lord. And here knowledge doesn't mean just academic knowledge. They want to know about him and they want to know about his pastimes and qualities and how he works and how they can get into a nicely connected situation or relationship with him. So all these categories, they are welcome and they are very valuable to. Now in this purport, there's one important point that's being made. In the very first paragraph, in the very first paragraph, if you go down just before the Sanskrit quotation starts, go up above that Sanskrit quotation, you go up 4 lines. You will see are not pure devotees. Can you see that?
These are not pure devotees.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
So,
these are not pure devotees because they have some aspiration to fulfill in exchange for devotional service. Pure devotional service is without aspiration and without desire. So that's this is a qualification. All four have a bright future because they've at least taken the trouble to turn towards the Lord. But these are not pure devotees, it should be known, because each category in their inclination towards the Lord, it is tinged or contaminated with some one quality, something that they desire, but that's still accepted to the Lord. And now the question comes up, how come then it's still acceptable to the Lord? And that's actually answered 2 verses down, but you might as well say it now. How come the Lord still has a lot of value for these four categories, although of people, of aspiring devotees, although their desire is not pure, it's tinged and contaminated with some material
It's
desire
like
or
a
yeah,
it's like a
because
gateway, no?
yeah,
It's
it's
like a
like a
gateway.
gateway,
It's like a
and
gateway to
it's a gateway to him. And what Prabhupada is saying in the purport to verse 18, we won't jump forward now, is that it's still very much appreciated by the Lord because there is an exchange of affection. This is a crucial point. And more than anything else, what Lord Krishna really reciprocates with is some show and some feelings of affection. Okay, now I think this brings to mind a verse that comes up in a couple of Upanishads. It's the Mundaku Upanishad for one and another one, where we are told that the Jiva basically goes through life after life in different bodies. And right next to him in the region of the heart is sitting the Paramatma, and they're like two birds on a tree. And the suffering bird or the jiva is hopping up and down different branches and of the same tree. In one life he tastes sweet fruits, that is, he is mostly happy and successful. Another life it's sour fruits because he gets setbacks and tragedies and it's more suffering or whatever. But the fact is that he's just hopping around tasting the fruits. And next to him is the second bird, like a sakshi or witness, which is there every single lifetime and is just waiting for the moment when the jiva will just give up and say, I just can't manage on my own, please help me, and turn his face towards the second bird. So that's a reason why Krishna is saying that he has value even for these four categories, because as you said, at least they've got started. It's a gateway and they've got started. And Prabhupada is qualifying the understanding by saying it's not just that, it's also because they have there is an exchange of affection. So these are not pure devotees, but still they are very welcome to the Lord. Now, the fourth category whom we are told is the one who is after knowledge. He's not just inquisitive, he wants more knowledge of the Lord. He is the one who is considered superior to the others. And I repeat that we may find that we have the reason why we turn to this path or the Supreme Lord, we may have a bit of each of these categories in our background. It often happens like that. It's not like clear black and white, clear cut boxes, or at least more than one reason. One of these categories is we may find ourselves in at this turning point, or that particular juncture in our life where we took to a spiritual path and a path of spiritual inquiry and a more meaningful path. So the fourth type who's asking a lot of questions about the Lord and probably is not in distress, not necessarily needing wealth, not inquisitive, but actually seeking knowledge of the Lord. Why is he considered superior? Because he has the maximum prospects. Like people ask, what are his prospects? For a prospective groom or bride, what are their prospects? Why does he have the best prospects? Because he is going to sooner or later on this path of gaining knowledge of the Supreme Lord, figure out that he is spirit soul, he is not this body. Then he is going to figure out that there is also something called Paramatma. Then he is going to go on basically to be aware of the Supreme Lord as Brahman, then Paramatma, and eventually maybe the personal conception of the God, that is Bhagavan. So he's already way ahead of the others. But that's not to suggest that the others can't move out of one of these boxes. They may have joined because they were in great distress and someone lent out, or someone held out a hand for them or gave them some information or knowledge that gave them some hope. But they may climb out of that box and get into the one that is inquisitive, or jump straight out and get into the type that's seeking knowledge of the Lord. So here we have it in the 7th chapter, where there's room for all types. He is not, It's not like one is condemned because one turned towards the Lord when one was distressed or when one lost all one's wealth or was badly in need of wealth. This brings
So in
yeah,
just one like I just
yeah,
want to bring in one thing actually.
yeah,
So in my case, like I mean, in this was one of the reasons of why I got into devotional and
yes,
what got me into it was like maybe maybe I could fall in the distress category, and then I kind of and then after that, like I mean, the desire of wealth was like a is like always it's always there, like in the sense that I'm I'm always wondering, okay, I just need like wealth so that I can just survive and do the things I
security.
like, yeah,
You mean
security and that kind of
security?
stuff.
Yeah,
And the inquisitive is like, that's part of like my spiritual growth or progress now. So, but I think it was because I don't know, for me at least, I started off with the distress. I think, but what about you? How did you
yeah,
get
yeah. I would
with
say a
yours?
combination of distress, the lack of wealth, because it was really when I was abroad and after my first year, there were some technical snags and the scholarship people did some politics. And though I had, how do you say, legally I was to carry on with the course, I moved from an MLit to, it's too complicated to go into here. But they took the opportunity and told me that they can't fund me beyond 2 years for the third year, but they will back all the attempts I make to get small scholarships to pay my fees. They told me this in the first year itself because a 2 year course was being converted to a 3 year research course in art history. Now, which meant within 6 months of joining, this bomb landed on my head. And unless I could move from the 2 years to the 3 years, my studies abroad would not have any meaning. But third year meant lots of money, 7,000 UK pounds so many years ago just for the fees, then the boarding, accommodation. So I was straight away in distress. And distress was not just in the form of where is the money going to come from, just mentally in distress. How am I supposed to concentrate if there is so much uncertainty? And the scholarship people have actually promised that they would support the third year and so on. Anyway, eventually everything worked out well. But it is in those circumstances, the distress as in mental distress, plus really hoping that somewhere from somewhere the money will come to pay the fees and to complete my course. That I would say these two together catapulted me into being inquisitive about something more, some source of some real, how do you say, some succor, some support that is beyond just whatever I've been used to. And I would say I stopped there. I didn't really search for knowledge of the absolute in those years. Many years later, when I started, that old fascination for the Bhagavad Gita flared up again. Maybe 10 years later is when I started searching for knowledge of the absolute. I think you already are searching for knowledge of the absolute. Otherwise, you wouldn't be
I
taking. Yeah,
I think maybe the difference between yours and mine is because like I mean because social media everything got like kind of fast forward in a lot of it. So it's like I
okay.
was in one sense I was like I started off with the same way like maybe you started off, but then because of social media I was able to like bypass YouTube. I was able to bypass a lot of things. Like I could easily say okay, this is another thing, this is another thing, this is another thing, and then get to a point where I was like, okay, this is the thing because there were already like there was information about all this available. So I was
I
able to see like, okay, this is they're talking about this. This makes sense. In one sense, I think maybe social media did help me in one sense to get to the place because I remember like this is also one of the reasons why people in like in my father's generation or whoever older generation, like one of the problems is that like for a long time they keep searching, but they're not able to find the exact. They were never able to find
Ah,
the exact part because like the information wasn't so readily available to them
available. This is a
at
very
a
big. It's a
young
very
age. So it's like whatever they were stuck with believing in, that's what they kept on believing for a long time. So
yeah. This
I
is a very
think
good point.
yeah. So I think maybe you were very lucky where you found it. Whatever the case may be. But then for a lot of people, like for this generation, I feel like we're a bit more we're more spoiled because like there's like the information is already there. Like you can if someone just type let's say spirituality on YouTube, you might not
Yeah,
get Krishna Bhakti in the starting, but then if you just keep going through it, eventually within a 2 3 weeks you'll find Krishna Bhakti, or you'll find people talking about Krishna and all stuff. And if it clicks on your mind, then you will get attracted to it.
Attracted.
But that same thing wasn't there before. It's not like same thing was not there in the the previous generation.
It's true, but same time, remember in an earlier class we learned how Maya keeps updating herself, updating her tactics. So if yes, as you say, an earlier generation, your parents' generation, which is really almost my generation, they didn't have so much, was not readily available. They were also relatively safe because so
Hmm.
much nonsense and Maya's tricks to
Yeah,
completely
totally.
bewilder people and take them down very sinful paths, that was also not available, isn't it? This
Hmm.
mobile phone phenomenon itself came only some like I don't know how
Yeah,
many,
it's
maybe 20
a
years, 15
yeah,
years.
it's a just as easy as it is to like let's say get spiritual knowledge or
Yeah,
understand these things very quickly. It's like that much easier to kind of get lost and not know where you
yeah.
belong, the path.
Now, really, now, like for every valid website, there are so many totally corrupt and sinful websites also waiting to catch you. Just one mistaken click, and all you know how it works. So it's there,
Hmm.
but what we must understand is that means for each of us, Krishna has a plan. Krishna has a plan for us. It's extraordinary how a soul takes birth at a particular time in a country's history and to a particular set of parents, and certain circumstances unfold, and then from inside is the desire to know more or the distress or whatever. So it's the whole thing is just very much part of a larger plan that's unfolding, and that we should bear in mind. uh, the it's like, I think, I'm not sure if I've told you the story. One major, not major, quite a senior, but right now he's leading a quiet life in Mayapur. He's into touching 70, into his 60s now. It's not very well. He was served as Prabhupada's servant, Hari Shauri. Hari, Sauri, Australian, that's right, yeah. He's got his wife and daughter there. And he belongs to a generation where, because of war, poverty created by the Second World War, his mother and was in such a plight that she actually almost tried to go and get rid of this pregnancy, to abort. But seeing the crude methods in use, because she couldn't afford another child, this post World War, UK or UK, and then they moved to Australia. Seeing the very cruel or scary, crude tactics they were using to abort, she couldn't go ahead with it because there was also danger to her life. And in this circumstances, or in this situation, what you find is the child that came out grew up like a fairly average, normal, semi-educated person, until he crossed Prabhupada's path and went on to become a person who's made a huge contribution. You have these, you get them free online. Transcendental Diaries, Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume. They make very interesting reading because he maintained day by day accounts. He had a diary for the years he spent with Prabhupada. He's overnight learned how to cook and learned how to massage Prabhupada's feet and travel with him and take dictation. So this is Harishori. So at one point, Srila Prabhupada took the trouble to inquire from him what his background is. So Harishori actually said, I ought not to have been born at all. I was that embryo or fetus that my mother was trying with knitting needles those days to abort. But she just couldn't go through it, seeing the woman before her screaming with pain and all the muck and the. So actually, Prabhupada, it was like very narrow how I came out a normal human being and then I've reached you. So Prabhupada was not, the devotees who were hearing were very shocked to hear this and maybe even thrown into some confusion. But Prabhupada just wagged a finger and said, see, Krishna had a plan for you. He had a very clear plan. It seemed most unlikely that that child that almost was forcibly killed or eliminated would come out and then become a great devotee with so much contribution to a worldwide movement, and still there very respectably living in Mayapur. So it's he has a plan for each one of us. From the most unlikely circumstances, people take to this path, and Krishna, people take turn, and there is a turning point in their life. We may have uncooperative parents. We may have led a very dissolute life until then and feel very sorry for it. But none of these are impediments because Krishna has had a plan. And once the plan starts unfolding, those impulses also come in our heart to turn towards this path. Now, the question that comes up here when we are talking about the distress and the desire of wealth is usually such people won't go to Krishna. They go to demigod worship, especially if they are born in India. Isn't it? Normally, if you're in distress, okay, distress you may turn to Krishna or Vishnu. But the desire of wealth, invariably it is to other sources. Even distress, go to Ganesh to remove the obstacles. Go if you're trying to study and get admission for some prestigious course, worship Saraswati. If you are well, you may go to Lord Venkateshwara. That's true. That's possible. So this is a mystery. How do those people then, instead of going to the demigods, how do they end up with Krishna? That Krishna is going to tackle a little further down the set of verses. How even if they take to demigod worship, he is sitting in their heart as Paramatma and he gives them a chance and makes their faith steady. And the demigods themselves are working completely under his command. So they have their role to play and they just do what's required, and at some stage the aspiring devotee gets frustrated with the temporary nature of the results he's getting from demigod worship, and apparently he gets frustrated and looks for something more, and that's how he kind of lands literally at the feet of Vishnu or Krishna. So it's really an elaborate plan, and one doesn't know, and one must never lose hope whatever happens. Because once the plan has started unfolding, our faith must be very thick, and one must always be able to see the bigger picture and how things are moving or how things are working. Okay, so if that's all right, shall we move on to the next verse?
Yeah, yeah,
17.
yeah.
Okay, next verse. Okay, in the 17th verse in the translation, if you like to read, Kannan.
Yeah, so of these, the one who is in full knowledge and who is always engaged in pure devotion service is the best, for I am very dear to him and he is dear to me.
So he's categorically saying again, one who is in full knowledge and who's always engaged in pure devotion service is the best. Fine. From in this purport, if you turn to the middle word, these words Brahman, Paramatma, etc., they come up. You see,
So he
yeah.
says, by searching after knowledge, one realizes that he himself is different from his material body, and when further advanced, he comes to the knowledge of impersonal Brahman and Paramatma.
And the next sentence is crucial. When one is fully, go on.
So when one is fully purified, he realizes that his constitutional solution is to be the eternal servant of God.
Okay, now just stop here. Why the fourth category of the person who does turn to Krishna, who just surrender, is considered superior is because he's got a head start. Like, you know, in these, I don't know what, not the marathon, but in certain races, somebody is given a certain advantage like that. I can't think of a very appropriate analogy.
Relay?
Relay, yeah. Yeah,
because the baton, they pass the baton, usually the first eight runners are like ranked based on their rank and all that. So it's like the best runner with the person who qualified with the best time in the finals, like he'll be in the starting or something like that, and the person in the worst time will start from the back. So like that.
Yeah, so some advantage is there, a lot of advantage, a great advantage is there for the fourth category who's looking really for more and more knowledge of the Lord, because he is got a head start. And what is the position he's finally supposed to come to? Like you can ask, what is the final position for that relay runner? Where does he have to reach? Like that here, he has to come to the understanding that his own constitutional position is to be a servant of God. So it's one thing to know that we are spirit soul, you know, we are actually this body made of matter is temporary. Our actual identity is that of the jiva, the soul. then the understanding goes a little further, and you understand there's not just the soul, there's also a super soul. Then you are searching for God and you realize him in his impersonal feature first as Brahman, then you see him as Paramatma. But in the process, like a seesaw, in a children's park, in the seesaw, if one end is high up, the other end is very low. Like that, the higher our understanding of God or God realization goes, we understand our own position to be lower and lower, exactly like the seesaw. When our understanding of the infinite of the Supreme Lord is very meager and very low and childish and immature, we think ourselves, the other end of the seesaw tips up. Where we are seated, we think that we are very, very, somebody very special, God's gift to the world, and make a big issue about everything, and everything has to revolve around us. Whereas as we realize more and more how great God is, or how kind, how loving, what all arrangements he's making, and the seesaw starts kind of tipping in the other direction, and we take a lower and lower position. That's why you hear this often word, this phrase bandied around, I am just a humble servant, your humble
Hmm.
servant. In ISKCON they
Like
will say,
servant, they'll say
yeah,
like
servant of
I
the
keep
servant.
I keep saying before part of my like meditation, I've introduced this thing like at the end of the thing I'll always have this like I'll try to have like a conversation with Krishna at the end of all my this thing just to like because a lot of the times what I realized like when I was doing my meditation and chanting was that if it's very nice actually, but then it felt like for some reason it felt like that the love connection is not for some reason not. I wasn't feeling that much, so I just said like after everything I'll have this like conversation with Krishna, like at the end of
Yeah,
everything in my
uh-huh.
either in my mind or I'll say it loudly or whatever. So I
Yeah,
always say this like because I've heard people, all these devotees say that that I'm just a humble servant or the
yeah,
servant of
yeah,
your closest devotee. So I'll say that also, because that's a very like it's a very humble place to be at, to be in
yeah,
that
yeah,
state, like,
yeah.
to accept that position.
And once we are actually do get some realization of that position, then it is said that we stop worrying and fearing, because we see how limited our own powers are, or how insignificant our role is. At the same time, we have to continue doing what we are expected to do, but this is a very good place to be in, to understand that we are just an eternal servant of God. That's our actual position. And we have to help others get that knowledge or realization, and bring them out of this whole Maya world of their great superiority and their I don't know, lakhs salaries and so on. The inflated positions, particularly in the IT world, it's all anywhere now amongst young people. Earlier, at least you had to wait decades to be able to earn a decent salary as you got promotion. Now it's not like that. So here, because the person who's seeking knowledge of the Supreme Lord has got a head start, it is likely that he will get here faster to the understanding that he's an eternal servant of God. And it's like it's like the seesaw effect. The higher your understanding of God, and the greater your realization and awareness of God is, or your devotion, automatically on the other side it dips, it goes completely down, and you realize that you lower and lower is your own position. You're able to grasp this point, that you're just a servant of the servant of the Supreme Lord. Of course, it mustn't just be an empty artificial exercise, because it's easy to say this, but to actually do it and to act according to this understanding is much harder. It means being forced to give up your.
It's a what I've learned in the last I've started doing this. I guess it maybe like almost a year is going to happen now, but like what I've learned over the months is that like getting into bhakti is like it's very like easy in the sense that you know what is supposed to like Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is supposed to say and
Yeah,
things like that. There are various like things that you can say and all that. But
yeah,
as time goes, you kind of feel like okay, it's something is not giving me the connection that I need, and so like you're always like just like anything else in life, you're like tweaking certain things, like like
you're doing
you
what?
find. tweaking certain things, like
tweaking.
updating, tweaking,
Yeah,
like like changing a couple of things in your practice, or
tweaking. Okay, tweaking.
yeah.
Yeah.
So changing a few things, like okay, I'm meditating for this much time, maybe I can meditate for this much extra. I'm meditating on this, but maybe I can meditate on that. I've been showing love to Krishna in this way, but maybe I can show love in this way. And so you're always changing things, because your mind is also like reactive. It's seeing so many different things constantly, so it's like you're also trying to adapt to the environment that you are in at the moment,
Okay.
along with your practice also the same time. So like you may have lived in some other place for like right now you're living in Trivandrum with your
Yeah,
mother,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
after some time you might have to go and live in Mayapur, and you or wherever you'll be living
Yeah.
after that. So
Yes.
again, like based on the environment that you're in and the situation you're in, the practice also might change, like according to how you perceive things and all that stuff. Like
Very much so. Yeah.
so it's like when I'm with my family, like I'm thinking about like only that small community of people, like my family, and then this. But when you are outside, you're thinking about not just your family, but you're thinking about so many other people also, and you're thinking about the relationships and that, because that is there in front of you actually. So
Mhm.
it's like it changes according to the sort of situation, I would say.
Right, right. Sure. Definitely changes. So, in the next verse, the
Well,
next,
how's
yeah,
that?
18,
Yeah,
verse 18. Yeah. Shall we move to verse
yeah,
18?
yeah, yeah. Let's go. So I'll read it.
Yeah, read it. Please read it.
So all these devotees are undoubtedly magnanimous souls, but he who is situated in knowledge of me, I consider to be just like my own self. Be engaged in my transcendental service, he is sure to attain me, the highest and most perfect goal.
Okay. So all of them are magnanimous souls, like we said. How come? It's although it's all tainted with some desire or the other. It's because they've already got started. They've entered the gateway, and because there's an exchange of affection, and that's what the Lord really craves for. All these devotees are undoubtedly magnanimous souls, but he who is situated in knowledge of me, I consider to be just like my own self. Being engaged in my transcendental service is sure to attain me the highest and the most perfect goal. And here in the purport, Prabhupada is telling us, it is not that devotees who are less complete in knowledge are not dear to the Lord. The Lord says they're all magnanimous, because anyone who comes to the Lord for any purpose is called a Mahatma or a great soul. The devotees who want some benefit out of devotional service are accepted by the Lord, because there is an exchange of affection. Out of affection, that means there's some trust they have in the Lord, some liking. That's what they're asking Him. They ask the Lord for some material benefit. And when they get it, they become so satisfied that they also advance in devotional service, because that satisfaction itself increases the heart connection. But the devotee in full knowledge is considered to be very dear to the Lord, because his only purpose is to serve the Lord with love and devotion. Such a devotee cannot live a second without contacting or serving the Supreme Lord. And the Supreme Lord is very fond of a devotee and cannot be separated from him. So here, uh, there's a famous story. I forget the name. It was one of the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He was actually a rich Raja, and another of the associates of Mahaprabhu went and said, "Why are you lying around like this on a big rich silk cushion covered some kind of divan, and with this turban and some flashy jewelry, and there was a hookah that he was smoking." But what the person who accused him of being just a lazy, comfort loving person did not know was that internally he was constantly meditating on Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And apparently, one of his servants came with a peacock feather fan. Those days, whether you were waving the fan in front of the deities or you are waving, it was peacock feather apparently to give cool breeze. It was so hot in the days before electricity. And at the sight of the peacock feathers in that fan, this particular individual, this associate, kind of just swooned or rolled off or fainted, because he was so intensely absorbed in thoughts of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as an incarnation of Lord Krishna. So therefore we can't judge often by externals, and we don't know what's going on internally between the Lord and the particular devotee. Therefore, we see here the example is given of Vidura. You know of that incident of Vidura and the bananas? How Vidura and his wife were in their humble home. Of course, we know Vidura as the person who
Isn't it a
was
Bhagavatam?
Mahabharata also. In the Mahabharata.
Okay.
No, this story is not in the Bhagavatam. This is one of the
Okay. Because I know Vidura, like when he meets Maitreya and and
yeah,
Vidura generally is the person who's like the advisor to Dhritarashtra and
that's
he
right.
follows. So
That's
I don't
right.
know. I'm
And
not heard of mango. Is it a mango?
bananas.
Oh,
No,
sorry, bananas, not
bananas,
mango.
yeah.
Sorry.
Because yeah, this is a side story and it's meant to illustrate what affection the Lord had for Vidura and Vidura for the Lord, and how the Lord placed more importance on that affection than on just the proper way of doing things. Of course, like you said, when we think of Vidura, he is the paternal uncle of the Pandavas and the Kauravas, and yes, he is also born of Vyasadev, and yes, he tells Dhritarashtra to stop his madness and to no, actually he this Duryodhan has Vidura kicked out, but Vidura takes it as an opportunity to enhance his spiritual life, and then he takes instructions from the Rishi, and so on. And then later, after the Mahabharat war is over, when blind King Dhritarashtra is there as a guest in the house of the Pandavas, although all his sons have been killed by the same Pandavas, it's Vidura who comes and taunts, literally fires Dhritarashtra and tells him, have you no shame to be eating food from the same people who are responsible for the destruction of your sons? And instead of living comfortably in the palace, you should just move on and go to the forest. Somehow the words, although they are wounding, they have the desired effect, and Dhritarashtra goes, and of course Gandhari goes with him, and in the forest they do extreme austerities in meditation, and then give up their bodies. It catches fire and there's a forest fire. But the Vidura we are going to talk of here now is in a different mood, because apparently he and his wife, I don't know the name of the lady, they are in their humble home and they are told, this is in Dwarka I think, they are told that Lord Krishna is at their door, or he is on his way, he is visiting different citizens, and he is going to visit. So Vidura, there's nothing to offer, and they grab a bunch of bananas, and as soon as the Lord appears, of course the usual custom of they wash his feet, and then Vidura says you must be hungry, and in his confusion, instead of eating the bananas, he throws away the bananas and keeps eating the peels. You see, because of so much affection, and you could say some nervousness and anxiety, that suddenly the Lord appeared and they weren't prepared. So in this situation, he is throwing away the actual bananas and giving the peel, and Lord Krishna is quietly eating the peels. The Lord didn't try to interfere and say, hey, what are you doing? You give me the bananas, not the peel. He understood what was going on in the heart of Vidura. Like, you have someone you love very much and your heart starts to palpitate when they enter the room. This I'm talking of in a romantic situation. But for the Lord, he knew how Vidura's heart was palpitating with genuine love for the Lord, and in that utter confusion, this happens in romantic situations, they drop something and they stutter. You see this in Hindi movies or any movie all the time.
Yeah, almost every movie is like that.
Every movie, absolutely every movie, a first encounter and love at first sight
Yeah.
and so on. But here the Lord understood what was going on in Vidura's heart, so he didn't interfere with the ras or the mellow, the mood of love that was flowing between them. He quietly kept eating the peels, the banana peels, till Vidura realized his mistake and apologized profusely and so on and made amends. So this is to show that for Lord Krishna, what really matters to him is the affection in our hearts. It's not so much the quantity of whatever it is we are offering, or the costliness of something we are going to make as an offering. It's none of that. It's really just the affection, and a jiva who is able to feel that affection for the Supreme Lord is very fortunate. He's called a Rasik Bhakta. So high topics and not something we should get into here. The ras or the exchange between the Lord. So then a Rasik Bhakta, for when a Rasik Bhakta makes this kind of mistakes, the Lord is not going to punish. Normally in a temple, if a pujari out of carelessness or in our own homes, we offer the peels and it's considered a big mistake. The offering was done all wrong, make another offering, or something is burnt, the rice is burnt because of carelessness or some other preoccupation. But not so in a direct exchange with the Lord, and not so if actually there is so much affection. Because it's said here, it is not that devotees who are less complete in knowledge are not dear to the Lord. The Lord says that all are magnanimous, etc. Anybody who comes is called a Mahatma. And because there is an exchange of affection, out of affection, they ask the Lord for some material benefit. When they get it, became so satisfied that they make advancement in devotional service. But the devotee in full knowledge is considered to be very dear because his only purpose is to serve love and devotion and so on. And then it goes on. Famous verse from the Bhagavatam 9th canto. Sadhavo hridayam mahyam, sadhunam hridayam twaham. Mat yat tena jananti naham te bhyo managapi. The devotees are always in my heart and I am always in the heart of the devotees. Gosh, the devotee does not know anything beyond me and I also cannot forget that devotee. The devotee. There is a very intimate relationship between me and the pure devotees. And you remember in an earlier class, chapter 7, I'm sure, we talked about the television in the heart. Srila Prabhupada's famous about, there's a television inside our hearts and we just need to shake it and get it to work. Tune it. That's right. Correct.
It's an old analogy but like nowadays televisions are like coming with set-top boxes.
That's right. Because those days the television was just making its appearance. Correct.
Yeah.
The 70s, last century. So the television in the heart, that which means that even if the Lord is somewhere far away in his spiritual kingdom, he will appear in your heart and you can catch an image, just like you sit here and watch what's happening in the Chernobyl disaster in Russia and so on. So that's why it's these verses that make us refer to these chapters, starting from chapter 7 on to chapter 12, to be really the heart of the Bhagavad Gita, because these are the Bhakti chapters.
I'm waiting for the ninth chapter to start because that's where that ninth chapter is like my favorite.
Favorite. Yeah, it's also beautiful with so many beautiful verses. That's true. The ninth chapter. That's also part of this Bhakti section. And now in verse 19, he's going to make one final, like a definitive statement, and then move on to the status or position of demigod worshippers. That's also interesting. Say, you want to read verse 19, please?
After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare.
Okay, this is a famous verse. Bahunam janmanamante jnanavan mam prapadyate. Vasudevan sarvamiti samahatmasa durlabha. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be everything. That is, knowing me to be the cause of all causes, and all that is such a great soul is very rare. So you have here in the purport, the living entity, while executing devotional service or transcendental rituals, after many births, may actually become situated in transcendental pure knowledge. That the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate. No, he is not distracted by any other temptations, any other demigods, so on, or any other forms of worship. Meanwhile, while one is trying to give up one's attachment to materialism, there is some leaning towards impersonalism. But when one is further advanced, he can understand that there are activities in spiritual life and that these activities constitute devotional service. Okay, just the first half of this particular sentence. While one is trying to give up one's attachment to material desires, there is a danger that we become very impersonal. Any thoughts on this, Kanan? Anything you want to share? Why does this happen? Or
because there's the aversion to, because in Bhakti we say that everything is like, we have to put our entire mind in the devotional service of Krishna, and that
Yeah.
becomes the primary focus and the goal. So everything else is like immaterial, like it's not considered like good. It's not considered in the mode of goodness. It's always considered in the mode of ignorance. So anything that is like material falls in that category. So because of that, like we can a lot of people can say like you know become like detach yourself from materialistic thought and become more devotionally oriented. That is like a very impersonalist. It's also like a lot of impersonalist philosophers and teachings also say the same thing. So
Okay,
you
you
end up.
just said it. Yeah, that word detachment. There's a tendency to artificially practice detachment. To say, oh, I don't care about this, I don't care about that, because this is like literally like we swing to the other extreme before we find our feet. We understand that material desires is wrong, or how we gradually overcome or transcend it. We don't know how to do it. So we have a tendency to artificially suppress all our sense reactions. We suppress the senses. Something very terrible has happened, we don't have a reaction. Something joyful has happened, we don't have any reaction. We really end up becoming impersonal, and people will say, oh, some of these Hare Krishna devotees, they have lost the ability to emote, you know to have any emotions. Actually, there's an artificially impersonal or suppressed or repressed, and it means that the person has yet to come to a position where you feel all these things. You feel sorrow when someone has passed away, or you feel joy when somebody close to you, or something good has happened. But at the same time, with the understanding that these things are also temporary and not to be taken too seriously. It requires a lot of maturity to come to a balance. Most of the time, as devotees, we end up like this, artificially austere and suppressing all our natural sense reactions, like you said, artificially detached. That's why. And therefore leaning towards impersonalism. This happens a lot in temples. It's one of the major points of conflict between the brahmacharis, who are temple inmates in the ashram. They are really there in the temple to run the temple. They and the visiting ladies and men, because this happens like in a temple, if because the poor brahmachari is struggling with his senses and is trying not to have too much interaction with the female sex. Even if a lady who says, can I have a seat to sit on, the floor is very cold, he will, instead of paying attention, this is a genuine demand. The first time person is coming to the temple, if they don't get this basic facility, they may never come again. What does he do? He answers very briskly or roughly and walks away, or gets a cushion and throws it from a distance, because he doesn't want to have anything to do lest he falls into that trap. So very common. It takes different forms, this kind of common problems that arise. But
Yeah,
whenever
it's a problem because like I mean I don't know if it's a problem because like if you become impersonalist like in one sense it's like in one sense I guess you could say in one sense Krishna won't be like chastising you or anything like that, but like he'll be like telling you like yeah, but your mind is not it's going to be difficult for me from now on because it's like not very it's going to sustain this level of impersonalism or like detachment is not going to be easy. That's why Krishna says like that's why like in Vishnu say this podcast they always make this point like keep the main thing the main thing. Make sure that whatever is the main thing you make
and the
that the main thing.
And the
So
details, do you mean the details are less important? What do you mean?
no they say what
Priority,
what
priority.
they say yeah they say like what keep the main thing means like keep Krishna the main thing. So
Okay.
whatever the situation is, like no matter what difficulty you're going through, whatever and all that stuff, make sure that
Yeah.
he is always the main thing. So so like you might get into like discussions like this where you get into impersonalism and all that.
Yeah.
But like always make sure that in the back of your mind the main thing is always the main thing. So that you always
Okay.
come back to
I
that place.
get your point. Yeah. Actually, I'm surprised that we have not discussed this one point when we joined. Question we were repeatedly asked, and actually there's a Shastric source for it. what is the highest principle in bhakti? And the answer is to never forget Krishna and to always remember Krishna. It's two things of the same thing. There is nothing higher than this. Like you said, the main thing is our connection with Krishna. Keep that the main thing. The other things we may flop, we may make mistakes, we may hurt devotees, we may do aparad. It's all true. We may overdo stuff and go a bit crazy. But the main thing is that we don't forget Krishna at all and we always remember him. So that's the highest principle of bhakti. And yeah, you're right. So the reason for this austerity, but as we become a little more mature, instead of this artificial detachment and artificially suppressing our normal healthy sense reactions, at least my Shiksha Guru Purnachandra Swami, who is no more, used to advise that we have to learn with a horse. If you're riding a horse and you pull the stirrups or the reins too tight, it will rear up and throw you off. So also with your bhakti practices, if you try and do things that you're not yet ready for, that are physically or psychologically too impossible right now to give up, then it will be like the horse that will rear up and throw you off the track completely. Much better to let the horse treat our own senses like a horse. He used to say, let it wander. It wants to eat some grass. It wants to drink some water from the river. After it's done all this, it's willing to go slowly. Then it's willing to pick up speed. Then it's willing to gallop. Instead of straight away pulling the reins and making it go fast. So he used to say we should understand ourselves, what are our weak spots, and not be too harsh, but sufficiently little tough on us so that we always make a little advancement and try and do a little more than what we normally are comfortable with. Otherwise, there will be no forward movement at all if you always stick in a comfort zone. But the general tendencies, especially for devotees to join in the temple, is to straight away leap straight out of the comfort zone and try and do some impossible things, get burnt out, or as they get fried out, and then just leave and go back home. It's a very common disaster. What Prabhupada is saying, this artificial austerity and artificially. Okay, now having made this like a definite statement about how Bahunam Janmanam Ante Jnanamanva Prapadyate, that was that after many births and lifetimes only, someone turns to me, surrenders, learns about me, and is fully fixed on me. Now suddenly the topic changes in the next 3-4 verses, and he's talking about demigod worshippers. Okay, it's interesting because he's very condemning. He's saying openly, look at the verses 20, starting with verse 20. Okay, verse 20. Kamaistair hruta jnana prapadyante anya devata. Actually, that very first sentence, if you see the translation, those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires surrender unto demigods. Means in the next verse, he will call them people of low intelligence, alpa medhasa. So he is being quite damning and condemning that those who have lost their intelligence. What has stolen the intelligence? The material desires. Surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. So here, therefore, as we know, especially in Hindu society, we know, and I think even for the Christians, there are different angels that grant different favors. The idea is like, say, if you're sitting for an exam connected with studies, you worship Saraswati, you do Saraswati Puja once a year. If it is a good husband, you do Vrata for Lord Shiva. If it is Mani, I suppose it is Indradev. If it is, then there is health, it is Surya Dev. Chandra.
Isn't Lakshmi you would worship for
correct, Lakshmi for wealth.
Money.
Correct.
For wealth.
Correct, thanks for correcting me. It's Lakshmi Devi, Lakshmi Puja, and so on. For health, it's usually apparently Surya Bhagavan, Surya Dev. He's the giver of health, and it's even said that in a person's birth chart in astrology, if the sun is well situated, sun is in your lagna, then you will basically have good health all your life, mostly. So sun. So therefore, a large part of the Vedas recommend and prescribe different pujas and mantras that go with it to appease each of these demigods. So that's interesting. But Krishna is here condemning them and saying it is those whose intelligence is stolen by material desires that turn in that direction and worship the demigods. And in the next verse, in verse 21, he is oh yes, he's going to condemn a little further down. What does he say in verse 21? That's also quite amazing. Would you like to read, please?
Yeah, everyone's heart is the super soul. As soon as one desires to worship some demigod, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to that particular deity.
All right. So why do you think this is the case? I mean, surely Krishna, who is condemned to demigod worship, shouldn't be giving facilities to that person who's running after the demigods. Why does he instead say that I'm inside their heart and if they desire, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to that particular deity? Actually, it's
Because the demigods also are like in one sense under the control of Krishna. They're also like part of
the big plan.
um,
The plan.
they're also like worshipping Krishna in sense. So that's why he says that if you are worshipping a demigod, I will increase the worship of that demigod itself because
Yeah.
you indirectly are worshipping me also. So
That's right, indirectly. And also some valuable insight is given in the purport here. If you like to read the purport, at least the first big paragraph, that
yeah,
just the first
so
paragraph. Yeah.
okay. So God has given independence to everyone. Therefore, if a person desires to have material enjoyment and wants very sincerely to have such facilities from the material demigods, the Supreme Lord, as a super soul in everyone's heart, understands and gives facilities to such persons. As the Supreme Father of all living entities, he does not interfere with their independence, but gives all facilities so that they can fulfill their material desires. Some may ask why the all-powerful God gives facilities to living entities for enjoying this material world, and so lets them fall into the trap of the illusory entity. The
Hmm.
answer is that if the Supreme Lord as Super Soul does not give such facilities, then there is no meaning to independence. Therefore, he gives everyone full independence, whatever one likes. For the ultimate instruction we find in the Bhagavad Gita, one should give up all other engagements and fully surrender unto him. That will make man happy.
Okay, so this is a crucial point because his independence means Krishna wants our surrender to be voluntary, and bhakti is something that is voluntary. It can't be forced out of a person, and it loses its sweetness if it's forced out of a person. You hear sometimes of these crazy guys. There were a few more than one case like that. They take a fancy to a particular lady, young girl, and because the lady is not uh, responding to their overtures or their whatever their interest, they then decide to exterminate, to kill off the lady, or they threaten that I will kill you if you don't agree to my. This is like forced. You're holding a gun to someone and forcing them to love you or forcing them to
Hmm.
marry you and reciprocate. But Krishna is not interested in that kind of thing. There is no sweetness. He is interested in sweet affectionate exchanges. That's why he's giving the independence. Because the question is asked, if Krishna really wants all of us to come to him, why does he then put Maya all around us for us to get bewildered? Why make things so difficult? Because one is that he has to respect our freedom of choice. Other thing is when eventually we decide we had enough of all the other tantalizing attractions in the material world, and though we have to be properly situated, we care only for him. Once this happens, automatically it means that we have made a choice. We are independently and voluntarily opting for bhakti for him. So that's very sweet. Therefore, he gives us that independence. Next paragraph is telling us both the living entity and the demigods are subordinate to the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the living entity cannot worship the demigod by his own desire, nor can the demigod reciprocate, bestow any benediction without the supreme will. Actually, a point that I discovered rather late in my all these studies. If you go to a normal Ganapati Puja, Devi Puja, Ganapati Yagya, which is normally done in a new house, etc., Puja is to Ganapati, the mantras are to Ganapati. There will always be a Vishnu form, one coconut set up in a metal pot, brass or whatever, and that is, and the fire into which everything is being poured, like the ghee and the bananas, the fire itself is considered the mouth of Vishnu, and the tongues of flame are all like his tongue coming to eat. So although the puja is to Ganapati or the puja is to Devi, Bhagavati Seva, Bhagavati Puja in a new house is common. But there's always Vishnu present. Either literally they say in Malayalam Vishnu Ahuvahicha. You invite Vishnu to come and sit inside that symbolic coconut which is decorated then with Vaishnava tilak and everything and kept inside with mango leaves in a brass or brand new copper pot. And on top of that, the flames inside that Yagyakunda are literally the mouth of Vishnu. So even when the demigods are being approached to give some particular favor or to appease them, Vishnu is very much present. And without his sanction, they cannot bestow anything. This is a very practical bit of knowledge that I picked up rather late in my years spent with the Bhagavad Gita. Someone from the Gurukul pointed it out to me. So they are also subordinate and they're part of the bigger plan. And certain demigods make it their business when they are really happy with the devotion or whatever out of their mercy to turn that candidate and somehow turn them towards Krishna worship. And Lord Shiva, it is supposed to be in the nature of Lord Shiva to be doing this, that he does this often. And a lot of Shiva worshippers will then come with, to Krishna worship and not feel, I am certainly one of them, not feel any fear that Krishna, Lord Shiva is now very angry with me and he is going to punish me because I don't have any aversion. Sometimes I like Lord Shiva wherever I see him. And whether, and if there is a sub-shrine in a Vishnu temple or separately Shiva temples, I owe a lot to Lord Shiva, but at the same time that is past now. So demigods are also happy often if that bhakta or candidate moves on to Krishna or Vishnu worship, because even they know they are subordinate, they're part of the bigger plan, and even they know that they cannot give moksha. Vishnu eva asamshaya, mukti pradata Vishnu eva asamshaya. Vishnu alone is the giver of mukti or moksha, no samshaya, no doubts about it. This is a famous quotation from Lord Shiva himself when he's advising Parvati in her spiritual pursuit or when she is asking him for advice. So this is the plan. And then in the very next verse, if you go to verse 22, he's continuing the same conversation. Lord Krishna, you see here?
Yeah. So endowed with such a faith, he endeavors to worship a particular demigod and attain his desire. But in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone.
Interesting. So how compassionate and how broad-minded a position Krishna is taking. He doesn't reject anybody at all. Whereas sometimes we, in our immaturity or our impatience, reject those who are not coming to the path that we think they should be following. Naturally, that impatience also Krishna appreciates. But just that they are bringing, same times we have to make some attempt to try to make them hurry up a little. I agree fully. If you just leave them where they are, nothing's going to happen. And yet we should be aware that Krishna is in their hearts also, watching all the activities and guiding in whatever way possible. The paragraph of this verse 22 says, those who turn to the demigods, usually because he is mad to fulfill his lust. Yeah, a living entity goes to the demigods, usually not here, but little higher. Doesn't matter much, it's just one sentence. Even if you just listen to it, it's okay. A living entity goes to the demigods usually because he's mad to fulfill his lust. Here, lust doesn't necessarily mean lust as we know it, sexual lust, but just an overriding desire to somehow get what he has set his mind on. So people will offer big offerings, these many coconuts to Ganapati and this and that and so on, to just get what they are really inercha, anercha in Kerala and in other parts of India and elsewhere also, because he's mad to fulfill his task. This happens, this is a very telling following statement. This usually happens when something undue is desired by the living entity and the Lord himself does not fulfill the desire. Okay, this is another point. When people turn to Krishna and desire these things, often they come away empty-handed. It's a kind of bitter result. Why do they come away empty-handed? Because the Lord knows better than us. And it specifically denies us the results we are praying desperately for because it is in our better interest. So often you see young girls who come to ISKCON, they take a fancy to some particular devotee, male devotee also in ISKCON, and they are desperately praying and making offerings and everything, and it doesn't work out because that's not someone else is meant for them. Yes, marriage, okay, they desire to settle down, everything fine. But so in Krishna worship, this is often the case that then you are handing over control to Krishna, and we may not exactly get the results that we are desperately and fervently praying for. But he denies us that because he knows it is not in our interest. He's got something more suitable for us, planned for us. And in the very following verse, which is the last verse we are going to study today, because the next section is something different. In this next verse 23, he is again condemning demigod worshippers. See here, verse 23. Please read.
Men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Those who worship the demigods go to the planets of the demigods, but my devotees ultimately reach my supreme plan.
All right. So here, something crucial and that actually conflicts with Advaitic understanding. It's just of interest because you also read up a lot of Advaitic sources. Here, the second sentence, just pay attention to the second sentence. Those who worship the demigods go to the planet of the demigods, but my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planet. But there's a famous Advaitic quote, or you can say an often repeated and oft repeated cholla saying, Yatto, it is Bengali, Yatto mat tato pat. I'm not sure if it is Sanskrit, I think it is Bengali.
Is it Tatvamasi?
No, not that. No, that I'm not quarreling with, not that. Okay. This is Bengali coming straight from Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, Yatto mat toto pat, meaning there are many paths to reach the Supreme and all of them will do. Yatto mat, as many as people or aspirants are there, tato pot means so many paths are there and they are all okay, they reach the final same goal, meaning that you can, now it is said that Ramakrishna basically came up with this because around that time in social history there was so much somehow Vedic religion as we know it had come under a lot of attack and was kind of splintering away, and the Christian missionaries were taking full advantage and converting people. So Ramakrishna apparently was trying to save the situation by saying everybody okay, all parts okay, everybody can be
accommodated. The famous verse, I think another verse, I think, which is maybe slightly more famous, is Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that. Yeah, go on.
Oh, you're not sure. Okay, so that's like Ekam Sat means like truth is one. Vipra Bahuda Vadanti, but sages call it by different names.
Okay.
So that's I mean that's a very I mean it's said a lot in the Advaitic circle. Like Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda, which I think was said by
Shankaracharya? Is it Shankaracharya?
I think it's done. I think Shankaracharya had written it somewhere, but then I think it is popularized by Vivekananda.
Okay, all right, fine. Okay, the thing, what is being said here, actually Shankaracharya himself was known to have composed hymns to many different demigods. You will see very rich and very powerful hymns. That's fine. And with Yatomat Tatopat, Ramakrishna is supposed to have made the statement in particular circumstances. But why these points are being brought up is because this particular verse is saying when those who worship the demigods will go to that planet. Fine, you want to go there, you go there. Those who worship Krishna in whatever form go to a variety of planets. Point is being Prabhupada, I think makes this point with this analogy. You get on a plane, you get on a train and buy a ticket to Delhi, then naturally you will get off at Delhi. Instead, you think you're on the same train, that's fine, but you bought a ticket only up to Mangalore or wherever the Rajdhani goes from here. You will be getting off at a different destination. So he is making this point. It's not about good, bad, and superior, inferior. As much as that is just practical common sense, If your objective worship is something different from another person, then the destination you reach finally, however seriously both may be on the path, is going to be different. But this makes there's a lot of common sense. Then the question arises, how to decide whether I should be getting off in Mangalore or I should wait till I reach Delhi. That's a matter of personal choice. If someone tells you there's a much better life waiting for you if you become a Delhi wala, then you change the ticket and you decide to continue the journey up to Delhi. Whereas if your understanding is you'll be quite happy in Mangalore, just you overnight from Trivandrum and you get off in Mangalore, then okay, you stick with that short journey ticket. So it's a matter of about personal choice, and Krishna is making this very clear. Demigod worships are working under his command. They are part of the bigger picture. Even they cannot bestow benedictions unless he sanctions, and they are there to supply the fundamental necessities that a human being needs to survive in the material world. So it's only natural that human beings struggling in the material world will go to different demigods, not only to satisfy the material desires, but just to get what basics they need. Really, literally, sometimes it's like that until they come to some higher awareness. So Krishna waits patiently till their situation is a little stable and something inside them clicks and they decided to come to take the ticket to Delhi instead of getting off in Mangalore, for example. So this is just like a fundamental point here. Here in this purport, some commentators on the Bhagavad Gita say that one who worships the demigod can reach the Supreme Lord, but here it is clearly stated that the worshippers of demigods go to the different planetary systems where various demigods are situated. Just as a worshipper of the sun goes to the sun planet, worshipper of the moon, Chandraloka. Similarly, if anyone wants to worship a demigod like Indra, he can attain that particular god's planet. There's a particular route to do it. It is not that everyone, regardless of whatever demigod is worshipped, it automatically reaches the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is denied here. For it is clearly stated that the worshippers of demigods go to different planets, etc. Now, if you just jump and come to the third paragraph, not
only are the demigods, not only the demigods pass the Supreme Lord, but ordinary living entities are also. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that the Brahmanas are the head of the Supreme Lord, the Kshatriyas are his arms, the Vaishyas are his waist, the Shudras are his legs, and all serve different functions. Regardless of the situation, if one knows that both the demigods and he himself are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, his knowledge is perfect. But if he does not understand this, he achieves different planets with the demigod himself. This is not the same destination of devotee.
Okay. Now about Brahmanas being the head of the Supreme Lord, in another place it says that the Brahmanas are the mouth of the Supreme Lord. Now the practical point here is, generally it is said that the Lord speaks through his mouth. Well, everybody. So the Lord speaks through the Brahmanas, which means that a person of genuine Brahmanical quality, not necessarily a born Brahmin, if he or she says something, it invariably comes true, because this is the mouth of the Lord speaking, and the Lord even makes it come true, so that to such an extent that you will see in our Mahabharata and Ramayana and even in the Bhagavatam, people are very scared to be cursed by a Brahmana, because that's going to come true. See what happened with Shringi, the son of the Brahmana, how a childish and immature and misunderstood the whole situation was. He cursed, and that snake bird came and killed Parikshit.
Or that situation where, I mean, it's like even the situation where Indra defeats, I think his name is Virabhadra, right?
That's right.
And they have this Virabhadra he's a Brahmin, but he's also a demon, like, so he gets killed. And so, like, there's this like sort of Indra has to go for like around 1,000 years. It's said in the Bhagavatam, like for around 1,000 years he has to he has to get rid of that karmic thing that he's killing a, like, in one sense he had to kill the demon, but even then, like, the demon happened to be a Brahmin. Virabhadra also was like a Brahmin also, so a Brahmin basically. So after killing him, he went for 1,000 years. He did like, tapasya. He did to remove all the sinful reactions and all that stuff. And then in that time when he was not there, the heavens were not ruled by Indra at the time. So like So it was like, so he was in, I don't know where he was, but he was not there in his place for
Right.
1,000 years. And there's this place, I think, where like they described this place where he did it. It's still there somewhere. I'm not sure where it
Okay, I'll check it up.
is.
Most probably in India itself, right?
Yeah.
That's what you mean, yeah. Okay, so yeah, so what you're saying, right? Therefore, it is not just that the demigods are part of the Supreme Lord, but even the different Varnas. And like we said, the Brahmana is the mouth or the head of the Lord speaks through them. So generally what they say, predict, curse comes true, so people are scared to annoy them. A genuine Brahmana by
I'm not
qualification.
sure. One thing actually I wanted to ask you, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure if it's true though. But I mean, I saw in some video of there's some video in YouTube where they make all these like Hindu related like topics. They'll make a video on this. So I'm not sure it's true, but like they say that the reason why, like people always say like, okay, why did Vishnu like incarnate and come in as different forms into this earth? Like he came as first as the fish and then the boar and then the turtle, tortoise, and the
yeah, yeah.
different forms of that, right? So I think somewhere like the question as to why what made him incarnate into all these forms in the first place. Somebody said like Vishnu himself was because there was this I don't know which story this was, but there's this story where there's this Brahmin itself who is like he's like a he's a Brahmin, but he's kind of like a demon or something like that, and he's doing some kind of tapasya or some kind of ritual to do something that would that's not a good thing. So at that time, Vishnu comes in with this Sudarshan disc, like cuts his like I mean basically like cuts his head or does something and all that. So that or stops the thing from happening or
Right.
something like that. And
Okay.
and so the reason why Vishnu incarnates this is that he was cursed by a Brahmin.
Uh-huh.
In some, I'm not sure it's true, but like, you see the reason why Vishnu incarnates and comes as various forms is because the curse was that you will never like you will never be in your supreme abode. You will always have to incarnate multiple times to get rid of that thing of the curse of insulting a Brahmin or something like that. I'm not sure if it's true, but
Okay.
they say that Vishnu. I mean, I think according to this, it says that Vishnu is like living out this curse or something that he has to incarnate multiple times to get rid of that debt that he had to pay. That he did something. He offended a Brahmin.
Okay. I haven't heard this. I'll check it out. There's a lot of stuff floating around, so we don't know how much of this is
Yeah,
valid.
yeah. So that's why even I wasn't sure, but
Sure.
I saw this video, so I was like
I
not sure.
understand, yeah. But I will get back to you after the class of one explanation
Mm.
that's given why the Lord actually takes all these strange forms in his incarnations. Like you said, once as a tortoise, once as a half lion, once as, and so on, a boar. What's the reason for it? There's again a kind of pretty nice commonsensical explanation that's given. I'll give that later. I think we'll stop here because we've been going on for
Yeah,
almost 2 hours. Okay, it's going to
yeah.
be 5:30 soon. So we'll stop here, and the remaining verses, which are few, from verse 24, he starts talking about impersonalism. So
Mm.
24 to 30, that we'll tackle in our next class. We are ending the
Okay.
discussion of demigod worship in the 7th chapter here. Okay? Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. All
So
right.
I'll just stop the recording.
Okay.